Yeah, welcome everyone, first and foremost, and thank you so much for joining us today on today's webinar focused on New Year, Real You, prioritizing mental health in the workplace. Today I'm pleased to be joined by my colleagues Darren and Helen, who I will hand over to shortly to be able to do introductions. By way of introduction from myself, as the name suggests, I am Rob Small. I'm the Business Transformation Director here at Diversiti UK. In terms of just a few logistical items, just to cover off and run through, just in case there's any questions in regards to bits and pieces being shared after the webinar and how we'll kind of enact it today. So the session is recorded, and the main reason for that is to be able to share it out with yourselves and those that are not able to attend today after the session, A, for a revisit, or B, for those that will obviously be seeing it for the first time. So that will be shared with you within a day or so after the completion of today's webinar. You are in listen only mode, so not to worry, we can't hear you from that perspective. So if you are trying to speak or anything else, just feel free to sit back and relax. And your cameras are all turned off as well from that side of things. So you can, if you're taking the opportunity to also have a little bit of lunch at the same time, then feel free to do so and enjoy. In terms of throughout the session, there is some interactivity built into it in terms of some polls and bits and pieces, which we'll bring up at the relevant points throughout the session. But do feel free, as I can see some people are already doing, to use the chat box to be able to say good afternoon to everyone, share contact details, be able to kind of just share comments and views and opinions throughout the webinar as well. We do have the Q&A box that is also live that should be at the bottom of your screens. So please do use that to submit any questions that you've got throughout the session. And we will, wherever possible, allow time towards the end of the session to ensure that we can answer as many of those questions as possible. In terms of sharing of slide decks, which I do appreciate is often a question that we do get asked, we don't share the slide deck that we're running through today. The main reason for that is that it is a taster of our commercial products, so a snippet of some of the information that is in our commercial products, but we will be sharing the recording, as I mentioned. So rest assured, you will be able to gain access to the slides. So you don't have to make notes unless that's helpful to you throughout the session today. So I think that covers off everything logistics wise. So I'm just going to hand over now to Helen for introductions and yeah, to take you through today's session. Enjoy.
Okay, hello everyone. Again, thank you so much for coming today. My name is Helen. I'll be one of your trainers. I would say I'm like a secondary trainer today because it's Darren who has the real expertise in this area. But you will be hearing from me a little bit later too. And some of you may have trained with me in the past as well, because I am seeing some familiar organizations popping up. So yes, welcome, and hopefully this will be useful to you.
Thank you, Helen. So good afternoon and welcome. My name's Darren. I'm originally from a little fishing village in the northwest called Liverpool. But in 1998, I spread my wings and moved down south. And I've been through various places, lived in various places. I've got a lot of experience from different organisations. And that absolutely handsome man on the screen there outside number 10 Downing Street, which a wonderful day that was. So bit about my background. I will bring to the session some lived experience with mental health, lived experience with suicidal thoughts, but also lived experience with line managers, some good and some not so good. And what I want to bring to you is that if we do things right from the offset for that person, we're likely to keep them working for us and keep them in work for much longer. So some housekeeping. So today, open minds. Some of it might be content you are familiar with, and some of it might be completely new. If there's something that you don't understand, please do ask a question. We encourage all questions. If we don't know the answer, we will come back to you with the correct information and data that you need. So there's no such thing as a silly question. If you're thinking it, somebody else is probably thinking it as well. Interactivity. We'd like you to join in some of the polls. We start off in a little bit of a fun way, where we talk about Blue Monday and where the idea came from. Next slide, please, Rob. So what we're going to cover, we're going to look at the signs of mental health and poor mental health. and the early signs of distress, the do's and don'ts around mental health conversations, practical ways to foster well-being within your teams and your organisation, and all support mechanisms and resources that can help you on a day-to-day basis. So Blue Monday. So where does Blue Monday come from? It's not just a song. There's an equation: weather, debt minus ability to pay, time since Christmas, failed or quit attempts at resolutions, New Year's, changes in life, may that be signing up for a gym that you never actually walk through the door of after the first week or two, motivational levels, and the need to take action. So who come up with this brilliant idea? Well, it was brought by a chap from Cardiff University. Let me just change my notes so I'm up to date. So why did he come up with this equation? Because he was paid to. The chap was called Dr. Cliff Amal, and the equation that he created was because he was paid £1,500 by a company, and that company was Sky Travel. Sky Travel wanted to boost people taking winter holidays and therefore create an equation to try and create this myth around it being miserable on one particular day of the year to encourage people to take holidays. Now, I'm not sure whether it actually worked and whether people did take extra holidays. However, the PR stunt actually worked, because over 20 years later, we're still making reference to it, although it's more about phenomenon around poor mental health rather than taking holidays. So it doesn't exist. Blue Monday does not exist. It's not one single day. Mental health and other forms of anxieties and depression can happen at any time. There are peaks and troughs in different times of the year, but it can happen more than just on that one day. And people who are living with those conditions will reassure you that it's not just one day that they feel anxious or depressed. Next slide, Rob. Okay, so I'm going to run a little bit of a poll. You'll see a question which will pop on the screen. Feel free to put your answer in. You'll have a choice of 3 options. Which months are most commonly associated with low mood and seasonal affective disorder? And I can't even vote. It says on the screen, panelists can't vote. Once your votes are locked in, we will move on to question 2, or look at the answer for question 1. Okay, we have 79% who have gone for January and February, and you are indeed correct. Peak low for low mood and sad seasonal affective disorder is January and February. Now, we're trying to debunk Blue Monday, and yes, Blue Monday is in January, but it's not one day. It's about the whole month, and February as well. February is often the coldest month within the UK as well. People think it's going to be December and January. It's February. How do I know? Because my wife was born in February, and she likes to take winter holidays in order to escape the coldness of February. So our next question is in relation to anxiety and suicide. Which month is most commonly linked to increased anxiety and suicide risk? The options: April, January, August, and December. Okay, so we have 40% going with January, 4% with August, and last but not least, we have 56%, our biggest, going with December. Rob, can you reveal the answer, please? The answer is indeed April, which nobody said. Often April is associated as the hardest month in the Northern Hemisphere because we've got through that difficult period over Christmas, the January and February, where you've got your peak low mood or depression, so to speak. But we think that it's a new start. Spring is normally when new life is. and we will look back with hindsight saying, why haven't I achieved things? So April is most often associated with the peak risk of anxiety and suicide. Having said that, that is what statistics will say. But anyone can be affected by suicide risk or anxiety at any time of the year. Our next question, please, Rob. So, which month is typically associated with the highest levels of stress across the year? Our big reveal. So 61% have gone with December, and the correct answer, Rob, is going to reveal is December. Often the most stressful month because we are trying to clear the decks before we take our festive period break. So often we'll be working longer hours in order to, when we return in January, to return to a cleaner inbox, so to speak, or less projects because you've managed to get them done before. So we're working harder. We've got the activities and the pressures of work, social activities, and the cost and finances related to Christmas and the festivities themselves. So December will see a peak stress in personal and work life as well. Rob? So workplace absences, excluding the common colds, flu, viruses, etc. The most common causes are anxiety, depression, stress, and bereavement. Apologies. So stress. Is stress normal? And the answer to the question is yes. Stress is a normal reaction, and it can actually be a healthy reaction. If times we're under stress, our decision making may be increased. So if that stress is related to a threat of danger, we will use our chemicals around our body to decide whether we're going to engage in flight, freeze, or fawn. But we need to ensure that we stay within our peak levels. Now, we can be overstressed, but we can also be understressed as well. So that inactivity, the two boxes on the stress curve, the largest ones are the ones where we're overstressed and the ones where we're understressed. And it's a hard act to balance, but we need to try and keep ourselves in that smaller zone of the healthy focus. If we're under active, our productivity within the workplace, and we're going to be likely to slip into low moods and potentially depression or other conditions if we're not having a fulfillment within the workplace. Next. So burnout. Burnout is a phrase which has been used quite a lot in recent years. But what actually is it? It's the emotional and mental physical exhaustion. Now, those who like to take holidays and breaks, ask yourself, do you switch off the minute you land in Benidorm or whatever country you wish or city you wish to spend your time in? If you're not able to switch off and enjoy your holiday immediately, it means that you're bringing some of those stresses from your workplace or home life onto the holiday itself. Often, and I've experienced it myself, we'll have a 7-day holiday. The first 3 days passes by so quickly because we're still stressed from our workplace or whatever's going on in our life. And then all of a sudden, we're on the flight back home after only 2 or 3 days of proper relaxation. How can we sort of counteract that? Take a few extra days off before, if you can. Take them a few days before to reset, forget about work. Let yourself ready to take the holiday full on from the minute that you arrive. Next. So warning signs, and these warning signs are going to be for most mental health conditions and are not specifically just to burnout. And there's always an overlap with most mental health conditions. They have the same often warning signs. So mental and physical exhaustion, and we're going to go into these in a bit more detail on the next few slides. Anger and irritability, sleep problems. Often those who are struggling with poor mental health or mental ill health will struggle to sleep. And there's nobody around to support them in the early hours of the morning. So their mind begins to run away, and they often will present themselves in work completely physically and mentally exhausted. Difficulty in focusing and concentrating. The easy task may be harder to achieve when you're not remembering or focusing the way you used to. Isolation and withdrawal. You may be the life and soul of the party 1 minute, but you may not find yourself engaging as much, or your colleagues may not be engaging as much. I often use the excuse that I'm washing my hair. People sometimes believe it or not. Increased use of substances. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail on our next slides. Rob? So withdrawal. You may find that people are taking lunch breaks alone. They're not going to events, and they're avoiding any formal chats. They've muted the WhatsApp group that you may have. There may have been the life and soul of that WhatsApp group, but are no longer engaging. It could be a sign that something else is going on. Changes in work patterns, increased sickness. So let's look at the increased sickness. If you have a member of staff that is not presenting themselves or telling you that they've got a mental health condition or they're living with poor mental health, but they take regular breaks or absences through common colds and flu viruses. If a pattern is starting to be created, it may be that the go-to is cold and flu because it's often not challenged. And it'll be 3 or 4 days, maybe a week, and then you're back in the workplace. If that pattern continues, it may be that there's something else going on, and a person doesn't feel able to address what that other thing is, likely to be mental health. It could be that they come into work later, they want to leave earlier. Now, there could be reasons for leaving earlier. It could be that they've got a doctor's appointment or they have childcare issues. So although these could be a pattern, they're not always going to be linked to poor mental health or mental health. And obviously, as well, working excessive hours. If their condition is exacerbated by being at home, they're going to want to stay in work a lot longer to avoid those issues when they get home. It certainly happened for myself. I threw myself into work. Yes, I earned a lot of money, but it didn't actually make me feel any better. I avoided coming home because I didn't want to be told that I wasn't well, which my wife was telling me for many, many years. It's what I needed. I needed to be away at that time. Lack of motivation or commitment and enthusiasm. Now, this doesn't have to be just workplace. This can be something that happens. It could be a hobby. I could come into work and tell you all about the fact that I love playing a guitar. I can't play an instrument, by the way. But I could tell you I love playing my guitar. And every time you ask me what I did last night, I said, I just sat down and played on my guitar, played Blackbird from the Beatles or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden you notice that I'm no longer talking about playing my guitar because I've stopped doing it. I've stopped doing the stuff that I enjoy. I'm no longer enthused about it. Irritability and mood swings. When somebody puts on that mask, whether that be to mask depression or anxiety in the workplace, every now and again that mask is going to slip because it is physically and mentally exhausting. I speak from experience. However, when I was to get home, I did not care whether I had a mask on. And it was often my family, my children and my wife who saw the real me, the sort of negative sides of it, because I couldn't put that mask on constantly. Increased use of stimulants. Alcohol is generally the go-to. Having a sociable beer after work or whatever your tipple is completely acceptable and completely normal. But if you find that a colleague is drinking a lot more than normal, is coming into work smelling of alcohol on regular days, it may be a concern. Use of nicotine, even drinking extra coffee or cans of Monster, Red Bull. I'm not sponsored by them, but other stimulant drinks are available. It's the caffeine that you may be looking to identify. Next. So performance, things we may notice in the work, a decline in the quality of the work that we're producing or our colleagues are producing, and the productivity. January and February often sees that decline within productivity within the workplace. And that can be quite natural. But they also could be the biggest months for some organisations as they close to the tax year coming ahead. So if you notice people missing deadlines, struggling to deal with tasks which they previously found very manageable, it could be an indicator. Difficulty in concentrating or making decisions which may have been simple. I still find myself walking into other rooms in my house or in my workplace and forgetting why I've actually gone into that room. It can take over your life, and you will then start worrying about, is this another condition, such as dementia, or is it early onset? Potentially. But you will find yourself making difficulty making those decisions. You can't commit. Poor communication, that could be short responses in emails, short responses in texts, avoiding meetings, so taking days off when a meeting is due, and general unresponsiveness. It could actually be people turning their cameras off whilst in a Zoom or Teams meeting. Now, if they always have their cameras on, but they're no longer joining, they're saying they've got poor internet connectivity, it may be that they're struggling and they just aren't present and don't want to be part of the meeting because it's all too much for them. And a lack of confidence. Confidence affects us in all different ways, but especially when we're struggling with our mental health. And that lack of confidence will manifest itself in showing itself in the other things we mentioned, such as the poor communication and the productivity of that person. Next one. So physical changes. Often we don't associate mental health with a physical change. But if you are appearing, or your colleagues are appearing tired or fatigued, there might be a reasonable reason that maybe they've got a young child and they're sort of getting up to feed that child, or they've got an ill child, or they're caring for parents and they find themselves having to get up much earlier. But if this happens suddenly, it could be that they're actually just drained. They're physically and mentally drained. And that will manifest itself in their appearance. When getting out of bed is an achievement, the last thing you want to do is get a shave or iron your clothing. You've achieved getting out of bed. I just want to get to work. So you may see a drop in that person's appearance. They could be immaculate any other time, but they'll turn up, they're not clean shaven, their clothes are starting to look a bit disheveled. It may be that the challenge of having to iron your clothing or get a shave is just too much. They want to be present in work. And whilst they're present in work, it may be that they're actually displaying presenteeism. Presenteeism, where they're in work, you can be seen, but they're not actually doing anything in work. They're just staring at a blank screen and not actively being productive. Appetite fluctuations, you may notice, definitely in January. I'm sure we all go on diets in January. There's only so much cheese that you can eat over that Christmas period. But you may notice some changes in eating habits. It may be that they're skipping lunches regularly. Now, that could be because they're doing a diet, but if you notice it constantly, and you might notice some changes in even overeating or the choices they may make for food. Life is busy, and it may be that people do just grab a meal deal. But previously, they may have had the time to prepare food the night before and bring it into the workplace. Those little changes can evolve into a conversation. It may not be an indicator that everyone is living with a mental health or poor mental health or stress, but it may be a conversation starter. Frequent symptoms such as headaches, digestive issues, stress and anxiety, and muscle tension. We often use muscles when we're anxious that we don't use in day-to-day life, constantly tensed. And you find yourself maybe getting headaches and pains in your arms and your necks and your legs, and start wondering why you're getting pains when you haven't done any activity. Actually, you're constantly tensed, so you are actually tensing your muscles throughout the day. Next. So stigma. there is a lot of shame and stigma associated with mental ill health and poor mental health, and that can lead to the delay or the avoiding treatment. It certainly did in my case. I probably lived with my poor mental health for about 3 or 4 years before I got to a point where I had to get the help. I was being isolated, but that was probably because I was isolating myself. I would probably like to think I would be supported by my colleagues, but that fear of not knowing what support would look like and whether people would treat you any differently, whether that's going to affect your promotion opportunities, or whether people are going to be too scared to talk to you about mental health. That can lead on to lowered self-esteem, internalizing that stigma and the shame and embarrassment and the worthlessness that people associate with it. And it could hide some health outcomes. You may be living with a heart condition, for instance, and because of your masking it, you're not actually getting these symptoms addressed. Because some of the symptoms that you have with anxiety will actually be the same if you're having you've got a poor health condition, whether your heart, for instance, that may manifest itself because you think it's anxiety or stress, but it could actually be heart disease. Next. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Helen, to take you through the responsibilities and boundaries of managers. Helen.
Hello. Okay, so Darren's given us a really, really good breakdown of all the different ways they might be able to catch if someone is struggling with their mental health. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what you might be able to do to help them. Firstly, let's talk about how, as a manager, you do have a responsibility towards the people who are working for and with you. And these responsibilities can include things like making sure that you're acknowledging everyone's achievements, people feeling recognised and having their achievements celebrated can contribute to better mental health and well-being. If you've ever been in that situation where you know you've done something really well, but nobody else has noticed, that probably makes you feel down, and that's going to get exacerbated if you're also struggling with things like depression or anxiety or self-worth and self-esteem. Then we have building trust. If you have a relationship with your staff where they don't or can't trust you, then the avenues that you can use to help them are going to be limited. They are unlikely to tell you the truth if they are worried about your response, if they think you might use it against them, if they think that you might be judgmental. So a really big part of being a good manager is building up that trusting relationship and making sure that they know that they can come to you and that you're not going to retaliate or act on any of this stigma that comes around mental health issues. In terms of good working relationships, this is if you've got a number of different people or even different teams who work under you, try to be fair to everybody and don't encourage sort of unhealthy rivalries. Like a bit of competition is very common and normal in the workplace, but if you get to a point where it starts to get toxic, this again can end up having a cumulative effect on people's mental health. It's important to make sure that everyone understands they're on the same team, even if they've got different jobs and different roles. And this can also help to avoid feelings of isolation or that there's no one that they can talk to or trust in the office. Ensuring that work is reasonable and relevant. So part of your role as a manager should be to mediate between your team and more senior management. And part of this means pushing back against unrealistic workloads, against very, very short deadlines, against expectations where people are given tasks to do that they don't have the adequate training or resources for. stretching that very common phrase, like going the extra mile, stretching the definition of that to being well beyond a person's responsibilities or salary. All of this is additional stress that can contribute to poor mental health. Um, if the work that your team is being given is unreasonable through no fault of your own, it's your responsibility to push back against that on behalf of your team. Because there is, regardless of what the short-term benefits might be, in the long term, it's going to grind your team down. And in addition to affecting mental health, it may affect things like morale, productivity, and of course, retention. Relatedly, of course, we have supporting your team, but this is more in terms of on a one-to-one basis. Um, Make sure that you're listening to them, that you're taking their suggestions and requests on board instead of dismissing them. This is also part of that building trust element that I mentioned earlier. Again, this is going to help avoid people having feelings of overwhelm, burnout, and isolation. If they can trust you to have their back and to listen to them, then that can be a huge help because, as we've mentioned, we spend most of our lives at work. And so what happens at work is always going to have a big impact on us. Having said all that, there are limits to what you can do and how you can help others. So while you have a duty of care to try to avoid causing harm to your staff, you aren't, or at least I'm assuming that most of you aren't their doctors or their therapists. And if you are someone's physician as well as their manager, there's probably a little bit of conflict going on there. But regardless, you have to set professional boundaries. Don't be promising things like, I'm here for you any time of day or night, those kinds of things, because people may well take you up on that. And when you start to blur the lines between professional setting and, managerial support into personal and emotional support, that is when you might find your own mental health being affected. Which takes us on to our next slide. So this is advice around setting those boundaries. First thing, be upfront and be clear from the start about what you can and can't do. So this is going to involve you knowing what is available in terms of the resources, and also knowing what the expectations are for you and your team, and being honest about your own capacity and the time that you have available to talk to people, to listen to people, to go and work side by side with them. It can be useful to make sure that this is not just communicated verbally, but also in writing or via email, those kinds of things, particularly if you've got a new starter. You should also try and make sure to prioritize appropriately. So that's about making sure that a single person doesn't take up all of your time and resources. It's okay to give some extra support when people need it, but don't do that to the detriment of everybody else. Don't end up neglecting other members of your team. The reason that you're all working together is to achieve a job, and you may need to gently remind people of that. Then we have redirecting relevant queries. So like I said, you are not a person's therapist, you are their manager. So again, really useful to know what internal resources are available to you, how staff can access them. If people are coming to you with every single question that they have, but there's a different person or a different team that might be able to help them, that can be useful to know. Or you might do something like setting up a mentoring or buddy system where people will come to you when they have like serious problems and not maybe the everyday small things that they might need a little bit of help with. Number 4, we've got ring fencing your time. So this is not just in terms of how long your one-to-ones or check-in meetings might go, but also in terms of when you're available on email or on the phone. do try to stick to your working hours. I know it's extremely common for people um, to send and receive emails outside of their working hours. When I'm commuting, I see people on their laptops writing out emails, doing work, and all of those kinds of things. But that is often unsustainable and again can have an impact on your own mental health, as well as communicating to others a precedent that can easily spiral, where if you reply outside of working hours too often, they're going to assume that you will always reply, and then the time that you don't, that's going to upset them. So try to stick to what your working hours are. If possible, it might also be useful to have a work phone and a personal phone so that you don't have people calling you in the middle of the night on your personal phone. So you can turn that work phone off and step away. And then lastly, a key thing about boundaries is being able to reinforce them. If someone starts to push those boundaries, remind them of that. You don't need to be nasty or anything about that. It just needs a reminder of, um, firstly, if someone is, say, calling you out of hours, um, one way of upholding those boundaries is simply not answering, and then the next day saying, "Hey, I saw I had a missed call from you at this time. Just a reminder, I only check my phone between these hours." It can just be something like that. Next slide, please. Because we're now going to talk about how you might want to have these conversations with people if you are concerned about a member of your team. So, ahead of time, try to prioritize clarity and reassurance when you're scheduling this kind of meeting in. Be clear about why you're asking for it and that it's because you want to help them. A lot of anxiety comes from the idea that if you're struggling at work, then you're immediately going to be sacked. That is not the case. And in many cases, that would be illegal, but that doesn't stop people from worrying about it and fearing it. So be reassuring, be straightforward from the start. Don't put meetings in that are just called meeting without mentioning it to a person beforehand, as that can be very anxiety inducing. Make sure to give a meeting a proper title and explain what it's about. Um, and also reassure around confidentiality, of course, because if someone is going to talk to you about their mental health, that counts as medical information. And so that's something that should stay between you, unless someone else does need to know. In terms of specific approaches, this goes back to that idea of getting to know the people in your team and building trust with them. People open up in different kinds of circumstances. Some of them might be fine with like an ordinary one-to-one meeting. Others might be better approached if you go for lunch together and you're in a more casual setting. So this is all going to depend on how well you know them and what's available to you. But do try to tailor that meeting to what you know that person's preferences are. Being prepared for a range of responses. Anything can happen in conversations like this. They could just stonewall you. They could deny that anything's wrong, even if it's obvious that there is something wrong. They might even get angry at you, or they might completely break down in tears. Think about what you're going to do in all of these different situations, because these conversations can be super unpredictable. In terms of resources, have that list of relevant resources ready, because they are likely to be very helpful to you, as that's going to give an immediate next step if they do need extra help. So have a think about whether your organization has mental health first aiders, employee assistance programs, in-house counseling and therapy, those kinds of things. There are also, of course, a number of external organizations like Mind that you can refer people to. And then if you haven't already, look up and practice active listening, which I will go into a bit more detail on the next slide. So within this conversation, firstly, acknowledge your previous relationship with them. If you haven't had a good relationship previously, it can take a while for them to open up to you. Or if you've not been particularly talkative or open, it might be that they're surprised you're asking. So essentially, if you've never had these kinds of conversations before, acknowledge that. And this, again, is a reminder to try and build up your trust, try to get to know people as possible. Attend your one-to-ones, don't keep rescheduling them and postponing them. Make them meaningful, show interest, and then if you notice something is wrong, it'll be easier to have that conversation. The next one, in terms of verbalizing your assumptions. So if you notice that someone isn't acting like their usual self and you think, okay, I think this person is depressed because of X, Y, and Z. It's not always helpful to actually say that to them. You might already have your conclusions, but it's up to them to disclose them. And sometimes saying outright what you think is going on will make them clam up. So instead, try and ask questions instead of, I don't know, I think you're experiencing depression because of your recent divorce. You might try, if you don't mind me asking, how have you been coping since the divorce? Those kinds of things. In terms of breaks, this is useful for any kind of meeting, but particularly one that can get quite intense, like this kind of thing. And then we come to this active listening. So this is a skill that is useful throughout any kind of management, but when it comes to talking to someone about personal issues, sensitive issues, mental health, remember to ask open questions. So that's questions that can't just be answered with yes or no. Try to leave pauses so that they have time to think and process what you're asking. Paraphrase what they're saying. So repeat back what you've heard from them so that they can confirm or disagree. And then paying attention to them. So pay attention to the specific words they're using or even the ones they're avoiding. What kind of tone of voice are they using? What is their body language looking like? All of that can give you more information about what might be going on with them. And then lastly, remember to remind people that they're not alone, that you're there, that you can offer support, that there are lots of avenues that they can use. If you're comfortable doing so, you could even share your own relevant experiences, but only if they're similar to what this person is going through. So lastly, afterwards, you'll want to think about agreeing next steps. So that could be, we'll check in again in a month, or here's the contact details for our in-house counselors, or I'll look into options for sick leave. Whatever it is, make sure you leave this this meeting with something to do. Whatever you've both agreed will be useful to note down. In terms of decompression, this is about looking after yourself as well as them. These conversations can be really tiring and really stressful, so give yourself time to process your own feelings and to calm down, because it might have been anxiety inducing or uncomfortable for you as well. In terms of following through, make sure that you actually do what you said you would. Half the problem in any kind of intervention like this is in the actual implementation of it. So make sure that you say what you mean, and then you mean what you say, and then you actually do what you've said. This is really crucial, because if someone comes to you and asks for something and you say you'll give it and then you don't, that's a really easy way to immediately break trust with someone. And then lastly, try not to leave it at just this one conversation. Even if it's gone really well, one conversation is never enough to fix issues like these. It's going to take time. So make sure you're providing support throughout someone's journey. Okay, back to you, Darren.
Thank you, Helen. So we are running out of time. When it comes to mental health, we are all passionate at Diversity around it. So we will talk a lot more than we've scheduled for. So we're going to run through some practical strategies going forward, because I want to allow some time for some questions as well. So Rob, can you skip to the next slide, please? So before a person returns, look for early communication. Have a chat to discuss any updates in the workplace. If your organisation does keeping in touch days or kit days, so if a person's off for a long period, 6 months maybe or more, If they're regularly invited into these information days, they're not going to feel that they've been stranded when they do get back into the workplace. Plan together for that return to work, set a target of a date, but that date needs to be interchangeable. When the date gets closer, the person might start feeling more anxious and they may need some extra time and support going through. Look for any necessary adjustments that may need to be provided. So that could be that if they want more extra breaks because staring at a screen can be quite stressful. It could be that they need equipment. If they've got a physical injury, they may need some audio equipment because they can't type. They may need some desks or chairs being changed. Before they return, look at information about what you can share. Look at your employee assistance program. I've seen a lot of chat around the Wellness Action Plan. Brilliant piece of kit available from the Mind website. Download. It's a contract between you and your line manager about signs and symptoms you may display, but also it allows the manager to monitor you from a distance without constantly having to check on you. They'll know what to look for because you've told them in advance. That also means that when a line manager changes, which is often a stressful time for many people, that document can be passed on to that line manager so they're fully aware of what that person needs at that time when they're at most stress. So during the phase return, gradually increase that hours. That structure is what a person needs. Some structure in that return, knowing that each day what is expected of them, and the following week that will be increased. But make sure we remain flexible, because there may be days when that person just can't face going into work. So give them the option of potentially working from home days. They're still being productive, they're still working, but the option of avoiding that commute might be just what they need. Help break down tasks into smaller manageable chunks so they see some structure in the day, and those early wins, those small wins. If you make a to-do list like I do not put more than 3 or 5 at most on your to-do list, because if you don't reach every one of those things on your list, you feel like you've failed. There may be stuff that you want to add to it. Do the stuff that you can achieve, and anything else is a bonus. Begin with those early tasks, those achievable tasks, to build that confidence in the person. If they've been diagnosed with a mental health condition, they're likely to have low esteem. They're likely to confidence has been really hit as a result. So let's start building that confidence up. Regular check-ins can be conversations. It can be even a walk and talk. Let's go for a chat over lunch. Let's walk around the block and have a conversation, just you and I. It can be informal. It doesn't have to be in an office one-to-one with a desk as a barrier between us. Next slide. So how do we change our culture within an organisation? It's vitally important that we do change our culture and foster a supportive environment. So mental health awareness can be done in lunch and learn sessions such as this. It could be that you get guest speakers to come in and talk for half an hour about particular conditions, whether that be physical or mental conditions, and implement training such as mental health first aid and one of the many other courses that are available. Peer support network. Some organisations have staff associations for specific needs. So bereavement, some groups will have a bereavement support group that is created by lived experience people that will meet once a month and have a bit of a coffee morning. So connect people with those in similar conditions. Team buy-in. The leadership is vitally important. Yes, the leaders steer the ship. We need to get buy-in from every level. And if somebody is going to be trained in, let's say, mental health first aid, then it's important that it's done at all levels within that organisation, because all of us can be affected by mental health at any time. Clear information about the services that are available, such as your employee assistance program, and what will happen when you access that program. What are the questions that you are going to be asked? What is expected of you? Managers showing empathy. There's a great video on YouTube by Brené Brown, which shows you the difference between empathy and sympathy. So being non-judgmental and empathetic rather than sympathetic. Being proactive with the person's needs. If we are noticing a distinct change, then we need to step forward and ask that person what they need, because there's no one size fits all. We will need to adapt and change the things we need for that person as they continue. And confidence building. Gradually build up the responsibilities, gradually give them more things to do. If we give them the stuff that becomes mundane and not allow them to progress, we're going to find ourselves in that stress curve under the inactive part of things. Next slide, Rob. So our key takeaways from today: mental health and well-being is much more than that one day a year, Blue Monday, which doesn't exist. Please remember that. It's every day. Mental health can affect anybody at any time throughout the whole of the year. It is common and can affect anyone at any rank, at any level. And celebrities who may have everything that in the world, like money, fame, can still be affected. So if it doesn't hold any grudges, it will affect anybody anytime. Stigma prevents that barrier to support, and prevention is key and cost effective. For every £1 invested in a person's well-being, it's returned at about £5 to £6 in productivity. So that draws us to our close. On the screen, you're going to see a QR code. This helps us to evaluate the training that we deliver and what we look forward to in future webinars going forward. If you please use your phones to access the QR code, and please leave some feedback for us, and we will hopefully bring you and see you at more events going forward. Over to you, Rob.
Brill. Thank you, Darren, and well done for summarising and so succinctly towards the end of the session. Sorry to rush you. Just mindful of everyone's time. So as Darren rightly said, in all fairness, there's I can see it in the chat. There's a lot of conversation that's going around it, but actually, fantastically so, a lot of shared experiences, both personal but also just solutions or things that have worked for other people, both in their own organizations and just individually. So that's fantastic, because that's ultimately the best way is to learn from each other as well from you both. So thank you. So I'll just leave that up on the screen for a second. There were a couple of questions whilst you guys are gathering your breath. We've got about 3 minutes for questions, so we definitely are going to need to follow up following this session, and I will make sure that we kind of compile all the questions that have come through and send those through. One of the questions, if we're doing quick fire, was advice on where the majority of the workforce works remotely. This was from Hannah. It makes it hard to notice some of those, I guess, nuanced signs. So to recognise the signs when someone's remotely.
Yeah, I think it is always going to be difficult, because in that remote setting where you've got a 30-minute meeting, then it's easy to put that mask on. And actually, you don't know whether that person's in pajamas or have bothered getting dressed. So the signs and whether a person's presentable can easily be masked with by doing it on Teams or Zoom. I think it's about personal one-to-one check-ins rather than groups. And I would always encourage people to at least get one day in the office, because we're humans and we like that personal connectivity. For those who are working remotely, my quick fix bit of advice for you as a person is don't change the way you work. If you were to work 9 to 5, that involves a commute, then don't roll out of bed and log on straight away. Do what you'd normally do if you were commuting. Go get dressed, put on your work clothes, and go for a walk around the block. Come in, back home, do your work, and at the end of your shift, walk around the block again and get changed. That distinctly separates your working day from your home life. Often you will work extended hours when you're working from home, which is not good for your well-being.
Thank you. So it does. I wanted to squeeze another one in, but appreciate it's difficult to respond quickly to that. So I'm seeing some other questions come through. So ultimately, we will, as I say, be able to respond to them outside of today's session, and we will come back to you with views from Darren and Helen in regards to that. I can also see a lot of people saying thank you for a very interesting session. So thank you so much for your feedback. If you kind of given it directly, but also in the feedback report. Just a quick piece of information is we're affording you early access to the next webinar, which is going to take place on the 10th of February. And that is focused around neurodiversity. So it's neurodivergent voices and how to create truly inclusive workspaces. So a very different topic, but ultimately there are crossover between mental health and neurodiversity. So I'm sure that will feature as part of that theme for sure. But yeah, so all you need to do is scan the QR code that's on the screen in front of you and be able to access that via our Eventbrite platform as you have done for today's webinar. Um, in terms of, I guess, just wrapping up in the spirit of time, appreciating everyone probably has other meetings to jump off to. Just a thank you from me personally for everyone that's been along and for all of the kind of resources and information that's been shared in the chat today. That's very much appreciated, and I can see that people are benefiting and sharing emails, which is fantastic. And a personal thanks to you, Darren and Helen, for your time and input into today's session. It's no mean feat to try and squeeze it into such a short amount of time, and I know you would love hours and hours, and there's so much more to be able to talk through, but no, I think you did an amazing job, so thank you both.
You're welcome, Rob. Someone just asked in the chat if you can put the QR code back up. I think that might be for the neurodiversity session.
Oh, there we go. I didn't see that one. Bro. So we'll leave it up. It will be in the recording anyway from that side of things that you'll receive in the next day. So you will have access to that, but I will also in the follow-up communication include the direct link anyway. So don't feel that you need to kind of rush and book from that perspective, but we just wanted to give you early access here and now. So yeah, we'll bring things to a close. Thank you so much. We will respond to the questions that have been submitted, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your days and afternoon ahead. Thank you once again.